There we go. I clicked it.
DJ. Woo.
That was weird.
Here, I'll go back with the slides and just slowly go through them.
Jude,
There. I
How-
won't talk.
do we know how to get to this RFA, to this request to be able to do it?
Yes, I will get to that for sure. So I wanted to kind of just first go over just some of the basic information, and then I'll go over application. So it really is for any school. So this isn't just for schools with the YTP program. This is any school that would want to apply, employment providers or businesses. So it really is open. It is for pre-employment transition services, and the funds come from PREETS. So all of the requirements must be in line with PREETS funding. We pay based on outcome-based payments. So once students have worked, we pay based on the outcome that happens with that student and the program. The application that we currently have, the 5307, is open until 2027 right now. So, if this is something too that you're thinking about and want more time, you don't have to apply for the summer of 2023. It is open for a few more years, and it may even extend after that. But that gives us a lot of time to, if we need to make modifications. You must apply within Oregon Buys, and Oregon Buys is the procurement place for any state service. It is for everything. And so your administration would have the information to be able to get in there and see the information. It is for paid work experiences, and minimum wage is the minimum. And programs do pay more than minimum wage, depending on if it's hard to have anyone work at minimum wage. So that is available as well. And these are for students 14 to 21 that are potentially eligible, or they can already be in plan with VR, but it's really about that being a student and being the student with a disability. So again, the PREETS requirement. And each program, again, you don't have to have this age range. If you want to, an age range within the 14 to 21, that's your choice. So the the work experiences do need to be a competitive integrated option. And the other program requirement is that at least 20% of the students that participate in the program are students with 20% students with intellectual and developmental disabilities.
CJ, when you say outcome-based, is the outcome that they work the hours? What outcome? What do you mean by that?
Yeah.
And does the school district have to have a contract with Oregon Buys, and do they all have them? Your finance person does that. Can you just touch on those two things?
Yeah, I'll wait for the Oregon Buys one when I get to that page. But with the outcome-based payments, is that part of the application process is to come up with a budget. And so what that budget looks like, I'll just do a quick and easy calculation of, let's just say, this is very low. Let's say your whole program with the staff time that it takes to support the students and the students' wages is $10,000. And you have 10 students. So if all students work the hours that you had put in your that we put in your contract, then you would get $1,000 per 10 students, and then you'd have the $10,000. So that's really what we're looking at, is we're looking at that we pay after. So you provide the service, and then we pay for the outcome that you provided.
Okay, thank you.
And every single program is very, very different. So just know that each program is very unique. So you can talk with every single program when I show that list, and they're going to have some different twist on what they're doing, how they're doing it. So you can really be creative, I think, as well. on the Oregon buys one. It's in a couple slides, but I will definitely get to it.
Thank you. And when you get to it, can you touch on the job coaches and how that works?
Yes. So one of the things to remember is that YTP is, I'm thinking you know this, is funded by vocational rehabilitation, and the RFA is funded by VR. So we really want to make sure that those funds stay separate, and that when you're doing YTP work, that's under your YTP contract. And if you're a YTP transition specialist and you're helping under the RFA, that is different hours and times, and that would then can be paid under the RFA. So you want to think about, as a YTP transition specialist, how much time do you have in the summer? There was one program in the past that applied, and when they first applied in 2018, the YTP transition specialist was 20 hours in the summer. Then there was the process, they reapplied for YTP, and they put into that they wanted the YTP transition specialist to be 40 hours in the summer. So that YTP person then no longer could work under the RFA like they had the summer before, because they worked 20 hours under the RFA. Now they help some coordination. Obviously you could talk to students, so there's it's not like hands off completely, but they couldn't work under the RFA because they were 40 hours for YTP. So you really want to think about that, of what your role and what you would want to do. And you can be the person that coordinates and have other people work under it, and be there all summer to just provide some guidance to people, because people are going to have questions and things like that. So, and that's really what that person that I gave that example to, they were just there then in 2019 to just provide that guidance and support to the new people that were working under that. So you also really just want to know your YTP contract. And so kind of here with the YTP funds, I kind of already talked about that. And so also in your proposal, just know that those questions will be asked. So kind of if you can put that information of how much that's going to be, that's really helpful. Of the time of the YTP person, if that's a key person that's going to be helping with the program. So, and does it have to, yes.
I forget if you mentioned this later on, and so I apologize if you do. But CJ and I review all of these. I'm on a review committee with CJ. So if you're a YTP site and you're applying, we look at the contracts side by side to make sure that there's differentiation there. So it is pretty critical to include that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And thanks, Michelle. I don't think I actually got into that kind of detail in these slides, so I think that's great. And people ask, well, do they have to be all YTP students, or can they not be in? So really it's up to you, because sometimes too, it may have students that are the core YTP students, and it may not be. One program where they actually within their YTP contract have a small summer work program within the contract, and then they had RFA, and they just had very different students in those. So the students that actually had higher support needs, more barriers to employment, they put that in the RFA. And so, and that was just kind of the dynamics that they had. So that too, they knew that the staff were going to be different, all of those things. So, so just thinking about how you would kind of formulate that. And of course, YTP students can participate in the summer work program. And that's where some of that too is, that as the YTP transition specialist, obviously you're going to have to talk to that student, if they're YTP student, if they're working under the RFA summer program. So that's where that there's that little bit of gray pieces, but for many hours of work, you want to make sure that that's delineated between the two.
CJ, we have a question around FTE allotment from Michelle here. She writes, so if I work 20 hours a week in the summer with my YTP VR students, does that mean I have to add hours to my schedule for the RFA since they can't be paid at the same time?
Correct. And it
Is-
doesn't have to be 20 full hours. It may be, actually, I only am needed 5 hours on the RFA, so I would work 5 hours. And I think the other thing that that has come up is it's not always super clean, because maybe you're going to work a little bit more one week and a little bit less the other week, and it's about that balance. So again, that's one thing too that Michelle and I constantly look at, of like information and documentation, because one of the things that we know from our RSA monitoring, that we still don't have a report yet, is that they hadn't come in years, and everyone who was on the team when RSA came had not been there. I think in their current positions when they monitored before. And so we want to make sure that anyone who would come back in 10 years from now could look back at our program and say, oh, okay, they distinguish between those two.
While we're on this topic with Michelle Clark's chat, it is sometimes true, CJ, correct, that maybe like if Michelle Clark is doing YTP and the RFA hires additional other adults to run the program, that Michelle doesn't need to add hours if she's not collecting RFA dollars for her salary. That's only true, Michelle, if RFA would be paying your salary. But if RFA isn't paying your salary, but your district wants to do RFA, but other humans are running it, then you wouldn't have to add to your own hours. Does that make sense, or did I just confuse everybody more?
It made sense to me.
It makes, often you'll see that maybe the YTP specialist may coordinate and set up sites in May and June, and then they hire staff to run it.
Right.
And they'll check in during their usual YTP hours with their 3 students, and there's 8 others who are not yet YTP students. So there's, again, this is what CJ was saying, every program's a little different. Just because you have RFA and YTP, you don't need to mesh those funds, but they're your students, so you may set up some of the sites, and you have the relationships with the businesses in the community, and that's an asset.
Yeah. And I think, and two, you know, some of those students really well. And if it's a brand new person working with a student, you may need to help them understand who the student is and how they'll be successful at work.
Next question popped up before you get
Oh, yeah.
Would a job coach need to be hired by VR? Most likely another school district employee.
It's probably, so the easiest way is through the school district. Because then if a student, now this is where Michelle's question with the coaching comes in. If a student needs one-on-one coaching, and I call it coaching rather than job coaching, because coaching is the work-based learning experience, job coaching is on the job. So with the one-on-one coaching, if a student needs it the whole time for the whole summer program, they do actually need to be in plan with VR, because we can't pay that one-on-one coaching for the potentially eligible student. They have to be found eligible and in plan. And when that happens, and let's say, because you don't always know that that's going to be possible. And so right at the very beginning, let's say in, mid-June, oh my gosh, we have this student, we just, did one day on the job, and we realized they're going to need this one-on-one coaching. And let's say they actually already are in plan because they are soon going to be in the work field, but we didn't put it into your contract. We can amend a contract to add that one-on-one coaching, so you can pay somebody who knows that student well, who knows how to do the job coaching for that time. I think we kind of
really isn't providing the coaching. The coaching is coming from whoever wrote the RFA. So if it's your school and you write it, when you write it, you hire staff and you maybe hire 2 coaches, is what I hear you saying. Is that correct?
Yeah, and most people call them job coaches and say all the job coaches, and they're not doing that one-on-one job coaching. So it's something too that I would talk with every single program more specifically about once they receive the application, once we approve the application. Sorry about that. Because again, you don't always know. And I'll make sure I talk about something else that I realized may not be in the slide. On that. I think we kind of really talked about this. So we just really want to make sure oh, I know my little note in here, I had to throw this in here. And it's one of the things, just so people are aware, VR as a federal program isn't allowed to give grants. And I know people always call the RFA and YTP grants, and you can really call it whatever you want, but just know that it's not a grant. If it was a grant, there's be so many, we give you the money and you do what you say you're going to do. So I just wanted to put that out there just so people are aware, because sometimes I've actually talked with financial programs, because you say to a financial person that it's a grant, and then they expect certain requirements from me because it's a grant. And so just when you're talking with your finance person, that's where you may not want to talk about it as a grant, since it's not a grant, because we can't do that. But you can call it whatever you want. Seriously. I mean, it's just so you're aware, it's not a grant. So how to apply? So Oregon Buys, I'm going to answer your question, Terry. So one of the things with Oregon Buys is, in order to get into Oregon Buys, you're going to, some administrator, the superintendent, there's some people within your school that have already gone in, and there is an account for all of your schools. You are part of YTP. All of the contracts that you get now come through Oregon Buys. So someone within your school does have access to Oregon Buys. And so you'd want to make sure of that. And the one thing I'm not aware is how they give access to other people, but I know that I've talked with people that have gotten that permission and have gotten in to be able to actually see the RFA 5307. And one of the things within Oregon Buys is the language in Oregon Buys is for all things procurement, which is someone who needs to buy toilet paper. So the language is really a very broad language that doesn't necessarily fit human service language. So you want to, in the drop down, you would go to bid solicitations, and in the search bar, there is this very long number, S-10000-00001-920. And I also did put summer work in there, and it worked for me. But I also don't know if everything works the same from my end as it would for a user, because I have different rights in there. But I tried it and it worked, and I found it. Putting in 5307 will not find it. But when it pops up, you will see. And we are on Amendment 3. So the Amendment 3 is the current application process in Oregon Buys.
So this is a number that everybody who's interested in applying for should write down right now. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, Garrett will post it. So
If it's posted, they can copy and paste. It's easier with all those zeros.
yeah. And then the applications for 2023 are due a little bit earlier, because one of the big things is, if I have had May deadlines for all of the years since 2018, and we end up getting half of the applications.
Uh-oh, your
What happened,
sound just
CJ?
went
Like,
off.
is that me or CJ?
And things less than a month.
Okay.
We lost you. Your sound.
Start your application due
My
date.
internet is unstable. Can you hear me now?
Now you're good.
Wow,
Tell
I
us
don't
about
typically have unstable internet. My husband might be watching a movie. I think he is. Okay. So and reason I made it April 20th was to give programs enough time to negotiate and be able to get the program started in June, rather than scrambling to get it started in June. And I think anyone on this call knows, because there's a lot of people on this call that went through this, where very last minute, and it really is a lot more challenging unless you have some lead time to know what is agreed upon within your contract, because what you apply for and what the contract's going to be don't always match up. We have to typically negotiate a lot of different things, and so just be aware of that. And so I'm hoping that with this date, we still get a lot of applications, and also that it gives enough time for people to have that lead into the summer without rushing or delaying things. I think that's what people had missed. And who to contact. So there is a single point of contact for contracts, and that is Jason Fong. And so anything around, once you open the app, once you see the actual RFA, which nobody from vocational rehabilitation can give it to you, you have to get it from Oregon Buys. And once you see that, if you have questions of things within that, you want to first contact Jason Fong. I can answer some VR programmatic of our expectations and things like that. And the other thing that I always want to mention is sometimes there are questions I cannot answer. And so I will always be honest that I cannot answer those questions. So I would rather you ask the question and say that's not something I can answer, or that's something that you need to go to Jason with, or that is just something that you apply and let's see what happens. But I will always be honest about that. So I just want to let people know that may happen. And I think there's many people on this call that we've had those conversations, and it's been that way. After you submit your application, it does go through a review process with VR, the Department of Education, and the Office of Developmental Disability Services. So we have a team that does this, so that we have very different lenses to look through, and wanting to make sure around, competitive integrated employment, the students with disabilities, those program requirements out of any program, and is that meeting that mark? And then we have a tiered review option. So we look at it, we review it, we either accept as is, we negotiate, and then move forward, or we negotiate, take it back to the committee for review, or we deny it. So just knowing that piece. So the RFA process, because it's an application, it's very different than an RFP that's a proposal. There would not be any of those conversations if this was an RFP. So this is really open so that the programs can tell us how they're going to meet what VR is wanting out of the summer work programs. This is actually something prior to submitting your application even, is internally VR soon. VRCs don't have this access yet because I'm not done with it. But VRCs are also going to know who the current programs are in your area. So again, they're going to know this. And so once you apply and we accept your application, that will go into this internal database so that VRCs can also help refer students to programs, as well as pre-ETS coordinators. Here are the current programs. So first I have the providers that have contracts right now and that are going to continue into 2023. So there's Klamath Works in Klamath Falls. Youth Rising has two different contracts, one for Klamath Falls and then one for 7 other counties. I listed those counties. Garton in Salem. The Arc of Lane County in Springfield, and they are a program that supports 100% students with IDD. Mackenzie Personnel Systems in Eugene is also 100% students with IDD, and they only support students 18 to 21. And then there is Ant Farm in Sandy. And the schools, we have 20 schools currently. We have Sisters, Wallowa, Athena Weston, Reedport. I should have organized them. of how they were. Um, Portland Public Schools, which is not all Portland Public Schools. Vernonia, LeGrand, Corbett, Harney. We have 2 in Baker Technical Institute, which is a CTE program. And then we also have Baker County School District. There's Milton Free Waters, Greater Albany School District, Reynolds, Beaverton School District, which they're typically not on these calls because they're not a YTP school. So that was my goal in 2020, actually, was to have 2 non-YTP schools. So in, last summer, we had 1. So I'm very happy about that one. Pendleton, Umatilla, Myrtle Point, and Lincoln County School District. So those are the current ones. And I know pretty much everyone I ever talk with within all of these programs are more than happy to share what they're doing, but remember they are unique. And so you may want to talk to multiple people or look at places that are similar in size to your school in your area. And at the Oregon Statewide Transition Conference, there will be a presentation by Baker School District providing some insight on their program. And I'm going to have a little bit of information just about the RFA. So if somebody wasn't here or more questions pop up, it is still before the application deadline. So there still is some time there. And again, talk with others about their programs. Please remember they're unique and they were accepted for their unique characteristics. And I think I said unique. Yeah, there's unique twice in this slide. I think that might be all I have. Feel free, just know my email is my real name, Carolyn, for any questions. And I've got a lot of time for other questions. And I know some people said they wanted to hear some stories as well, so I can also share stories if you wanted.
Les wants to speak up here.
Okay.
Hi, CJ. And for those who don't know me, I'm the new Transition Network Facilitator for Douglas, Coos, and Curry County. Darcy Shivers used to have my role, so that's who I am now. Hi, CJ. The question I had is, what's the time frame for the work start and end dates for this RFA? What's that window look like? And when can job coaches, if the school's hiring people to be support staff, when can they start spending the money to train that support staff over the summer?
So the window for the work experience for the summer, is that what you mean, Les?
Yes.
That's going to be up to you. It's summer work. So there are programs that start the last week of July, go into August. There's programs that start in June and end mid-July. Places in Eastern Oregon where it gets really hot and they don't want to have students working because they might be working outside end of July, early August. Some programs are 10 weeks, some programs are 4 weeks. So really that's going to be completely dependent on what you're wanting to do with your program. And I would say, the only answer with hiring people is I would say you would want your application accepted and negotiations negotiated to know that you're actually moving forward. Because we haven't accepted all applications. And sometimes when we negotiate, there are things that may or may not be allowable. So that would be my suggestion there.
We have a complicated question for you, and this is a good one for anyone who hasn't applied before. I am finding myself a bit confused on what the actual summer work can be. Are we limited to one business, or can we have multiple students at multiple jobs? Also, can there be a school-based business?
So one of the things, this is a hard question to answer. And so I can answer only a piece of it because really I would rather, the biggest piece that you want to think about is competitive integrated employment. that is a key component of this RFA. And I think the other piece that I want to say is because there have been groups, programs. There are two other RFAs prior to this. We had a 4448, which was a year-round program that didn't have the competitive integrated employment as the only option for students. So if you're talking to somebody who had that in the past, they have a different perspective. The 4708 did have the competitive integrated employment, which was the RFA right before the 5307. So I think one of this is a part of a question that I can't fully answer. There are other people that will be able to provide that, but I can't provide the full answer to this question. And my biggest thing is think about, because the application process is it's application, 3 pages long. Apply as soon as you can so we can then talk about it. I know it's not the answer that you want, but that's the answer that I have to provide. It's a tough one. Yeah.
Thank you.
I think, should we talk about the one success story?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay.
One of the success story.
Oh my gosh. Yes. So there's a lot. So over the years, we have increased this program. And I can't remember in 2018 how many we had, but it was probably maybe around 15 to 20. And last summer we had 31 contracts for this. And of those contracts, we ended up having over 500 students working, and 47% of those students were students with IDD. So that just really shows too, because a lot of times this is that opportunity for those students with IDD to kind of start messing around with work and seeing where they like that. But I think one of the things that happened is Salem Kaiser School District, one of the things is it's in the application it's in the application around sustainability. And everyone has to, because these are PREATS dollars, we're not always sure, with any kind of state funding, of the ebb and flow of funds. And so we always have a sustainability, you have to put in a sustainability plan. And one of them is that they really did want to do this program on their own, and they are no longer part of the RFA because their sustainability plan worked, and they now have figured out how to fund staff and students to be able to have a summer work program for about 40 students. So pretty exciting to hear that. So, and it was interesting because talking with them when they applied in 2019, that was their goal. And so they did it. So a year earlier than I thought, but they did it. So I was really happy to hear.
What was the key to their success? What did they do? How did they become sustainable, I wonder?
I will find out more, and I think it'll make a really great story for our VR information that comes out. I know they incorporated students with disabilities interviewing new staff, and those students were paid, because if I interview somebody, I'm going to be paid to be in that interview. And that was kind of, I think, a shift for their district and how they looked at students with disabilities and their capabilities on a different level. So that wasn't part of the summer work. That just was a result of the summer work that kind of changed how people looked at students and the viability of students with disabilities being productive citizens. So I think the rest of the story will definitely come out, because I'm very interested in all of the details around that and how that came to be.
CJ, can you give some examples of other schools, what they've done? I'm familiar with Myrtle Points and some others that have happened, but can you give some examples? And it kind of goes to Nicole's question here. Are we limited to have one business, or can we have multiple businesses, or what does that look like?
There's a piece of me that just wants to call out a couple people. One of them is staring at me right now. She's smiling. Kathy. She's been doing this for a while.
How are you?
Good.
So do you want me to talk about like an example of a student that's successful through the RFA?
Yeah.
I'd like to know how
Your overall
the
program.
Yeah.
Okay, the overall program.
Mhm.
So the overall program that we do is we look at each individual students and we employ them in their interests or what they want to actually get a job in. For instance, gaming or computer work or agriculture or auto, etc. So what we do is we assess them first, and then we line them up for interviews with employers that we have that is in their interests. And then after that, we they get to working. And some of them we end up, like CJ said, some of them end up having to have job coaches because of their barriers to employment. Just it becomes too much. So they might need a job coach for like a week or 2 weeks, and then they break away and they start being more successful on their own. What we try to do though also is we try to connect the pre-ets in summer works also with other programs that we have during the year. So we don't just stop at summer works. So we'll have a student come in and want to do auto. So we'll get them a place at like Auto One Auto. And then after that, the next summer or the next school year, we'll have them take a class at Mount Hood that introduces them to auto, on a Friday. We don't have school on Friday. So they'll go to a class on Friday that Corbett pays for. And then the beauty of it is a lot of times when they do well in summer works, like Auto One Auto will support that student getting into the auto program at Mount Hood Community College. And then they end up being where the student interns for Mount Hood for their auto program. And so we try to tie it into the interests of the student and then continue from there. And we've had some good success. I mean, we usually about 50% of our students end up being employed or go on further in their education after summer works in the area that they choose to do their pre-ets in through summer works.
And one thing too, with your program, Kathy, there was one, and I'm not going to name the place because it might give away who the student might be, but there was a student who didn't have transportation. And so there was a place that he could work that was walking distance from his house. And it wasn't necessarily of interest to the student until he started working there. And it ended up being a really good match because he just wanted some experience. And that was kind of like, we did the best we could, and it ended up being a phenomenal place. And he didn't know he even had those interests. So that was a really, I think those are the things that end up happening a lot of times with the programs is students really supply. And I see Amy on here too. She's had super surprises as well from students, especially like at the Saturday market.
Yeah, you definitely have to be able to punt with these students because things do come up. Like they thought they'd love this working in the computer security world and they don't. So you find them something else, or a student doesn't think they want to do something, but they need to walk. That's their choice and they end up loving it. Yeah. And I call CJ a lot. So with questions, because we sometimes alter things as we go. Right?
Yes. Yeah. And programs will have, all of the details around what are the requirements after the application has been approved of all of the, there's different timelines because pre-ets, I think one thing, this should be a bonus to anybody. VR records your pre-ets for you. So that's, a nice thing. You don't put them you don't have to record them. I mean, you record them on a spreadsheet, but you don't have to put the data entry in. So
We also in Corbett have what we call classes too. We have 5 or 6 different classes the students can go to during the summer works, where they come to the school, or I team up with Reynolds where they go to RLA at Reynolds, and we teach them adulting skills also during the summer works program.
Do they do that 1 day a week, all the students, and then they work 4 days?
Well, yeah, they do it 1 day a week and most of them work 3 or 4 days. Yes.
Please.
does anyone else want to share? Amy, do you want to share your Saturday market? Farmers
Yeah,
market?
sure. I'm happy to share. We let's see, we've done 2 years of the RFA, and we have a few students that did it was actually the Sunday market. They were working with, one student was working with a farm, so he was like a produce stalker, and the other one was doing kombucha and like customer service, sampling, yeah, just different skills. And the student that was doing, both of them went back for the second year. And I guess one of them got hired on by the farm to do Sunday market for forever, as long as he wants to. And then the other one, the supervisor had so many good things to say, and was just like, he's a totally different kid than when he started. He wouldn't talk, he was hiding from people, he might not show up, versus, how he ended the second year. And they were incredibly impressed. They would leave him in charge of the tent, and he was just, yeah, it was amazing to see the growth. So I think those were some of our most successful kids. He's been offered a job at the kombucha plant, I guess, but it's in Bend, so unfortunately needs to get his license to get there. But yeah, that was one of our many success stories, and it's just an awesome program to be able to and get your foot in the door with employers, but also see the growth with kids and have a little bit of flexibility with, some kids burn out and it's not a great fit, or they realize what they don't want to do. But yeah, all praise.
Thanks, Amy.
Yeah.
I know that kombucha story was a great one. Just had no idea, because how many students want to work on the weekends in the summer? And he loved it. So anything else? Or anyone else want to share?
I also couldn't just chime in about, it's given us a lot more like sort of an visibility in terms of the program. And we think really through the RFA have been invited to speak at different business meetings, and our name is kind of getting more spread around. So it's been huge for just making business relationships. And I think seems like almost all businesses that we approach and say, hey, we have this money available, we want to set up an internship, say yes. So it's really awesome for that.
And I think I've heard that from many programs that after sometimes the first year, but definitely after the second year, their name is out there, and people are coming to you to say, do you have students that, want some summer work? So.
Any other questions? You can register for OSTC. It's open. Any other announcements that anyone has to share?
I would just say, this is Michelle, a reminder, your amendment materials for 23-24 are due January 20th. You really should be working through your admin and business office folks. Those need to come to me from one of those guys. I know a lot of you play different parts and pieces of writing that stuff, but it needs to come from them, be endorsed by them, et cetera, et cetera. Our Are there any questions about that? We're doing a flat budget from 22, 23 to 23, 24. We will be, there have a common question so far is what about events and things like that? We will, for any required YTP trainings in 23, 24, we'll always be offering a virtual option. Because some places have had to move dollars out of that area to cover increased personnel costs. So we're going to navigate that. Obviously don't have it all mapped out yet, but that's the reality where we're at right now. So thanks to those sites, we're getting them in early.
Yeah, thanks everybody for being here.
Next month is, we'll be talking about mental health.
Mental health.
That is a topic we can all learn more about.
Thanks, everybody.
Right.
See you next month. Have a great January and Happy New Year.